The moving truck hadn't even pulled away when I felt it, that prickling sensation of being watched. I turned slowly, cardboard box in hand, and there she was, Deborah Carlisle, HOA president of Willow Ridge. Strawberry blonde bob perfectly styled, polo shirt starched stiff enough to stand on its own, and a clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. She moved toward me with the kind of purposeful stride that screamed I own these sidewalks. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "You'll need to fill out these compliance forms immediately." She thrust the clipboard at me like she was serving a subpoena. I glanced down at the stack of papers. Architectural review request, landscaping guidelines, approved exterior paint colors, and laughed. "No thanks." Her perfectly penciled eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me? I'm not joining the HOA." I shifted the box in my arms and stepped around her toward my front door. Deborah moved to block me, her perfume, something overpoweringly floral, clashing with the crisp autumn air. "That's not how this works. All homes in Willow Ridge are part of the association." I paused. "Not this one." Her lips thinned. "The previous owners were members in good standing for 12 years. Great for them." I shrugged. "But I bought this house specifically because it's one of the 6 non-HOA properties in this neighborhood. Check your own bylaws. Lots 42 through 47 were grandfathered out when the development expanded in 2004. The way her face twitched told me 2 things. She knew I was right. She hated that I knew. Deborah recovered fast, her voice dropping to a honey-coated warning. "You're making a mistake. This community has standards." "Yeah." I grinned. "So do I. And my standards include not paying $400 a month for someone to tell me what color I can paint my own damn house." For a split second, her mask slipped. Something ugly flashed in her eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by that plastic smile. "We'll see about that." She spun on her heel and marched off, her kitten heels clicking against the pavement like a ticking time bomb. I should have known that it wasn't over. But even I didn't expect her to escalate things that fast. The knock at dawn, 5:47 a.m. That's when the pounding started. I'd been awake for 20 minutes, old habit from my patrol days, and was sipping coffee when my front door shook like someone was trying to kick it in. Through the peephole, I saw 2 cops in uniform, and behind them, barely containing her smirk, stood Deborah. I opened the door. "Can I help you?" The older cop, a sergeant according to his stripes, gave me an apologetic look. "Sir, we received a complaint about an unauthorized occupant at this residence." Deborah couldn't help herself. "He refuses to provide proof of ownership or complete mandatory HOA paperwork." Her voice dripped with faux concern. "I'm just worried about neighborhood safety." The younger cop shifted uncomfortably. "We need to see some ID and confirmation you legally reside here, sir." I took a slow sip of coffee. "Sure." Setting the mug down, I reached into my back pocket and pulled out my wallet. Deborah leaned forward eagerly, probably expecting a fake ID or some other gotcha moment. Instead, she got my badge. The color drain. Funny how fast a person can go from smug to sickly. Deborah's face lost all its color as the cop straightened up. "Detective Mark Harris," I said evenly, 12th Precinct. "And as I explained to Ms. Carlisle here yesterday, this property isn't part of her HOA. Never has been." The sergeant shot Deborah a look that could have melted steel. "Ma'am, you said this was a squatter situation." He could be lying about owning the place," she stammered. I reached inside and grabbed a folder off the entry table. Deed, title insurance. Even the 2004 land survey showing this lot's HOA exemption. I handed it to the sergeant, all notarized. The cops flipped through the documents while Deborah's manicured nails dug into her clipboard. The sergeant handed everything back with a sigh. "Everything checks out. Sorry to bother you, detective." As they turned to leave, Deborah hissed, "This isn't over." The sergeant paused. "Ma'am, unless you have actual evidence of a crime, I suggest you drop it. Filing false police reports is a misdemeanor in this state." The way her mouth clicked shut was almost comical. Almost. Because as the cops walked away, Deborah turned to me with a look so venomous it could have killed a small animal. She had no idea what was coming next. The calm before the storm. For 3 days, nothing happened. No surprise inspections. No thinly veiled threats. Just blissful silence. I should have known better. On the 4th morning, I found the first gift. A bright orange violation notice duct taped to my front door. Unapproved garbage receptacle observed at curb. Attached was a blurry photo of my trash can. I laughed hard. Then I checked my security cameras. There she was, Deborah herself, slinking up my driveway at 6:03 a.m. in a ridiculous oversized sun hat, like she was in some bad spy movie. She'd staged the photo, nudging my can slightly out of alignment before snapping the picture. That's when I realized this wasn't just about rules. This was war. And Deborah Carlisle had just made her first mistake. The security footage was almost too perfect. There was Deborah, creeping up my driveway before sunrise like some suburban cat burglar, her oversized sun hat flopping with each step. She paused, glanced around, then deliberately shoved my trash, can 6 inches out of alignment with the curb. The way she snapped the photo, chin tilted in triumph. You'd think she just uncovered a drug den instead of a slightly crooked bin. I saved the clip, labeled it Exhibit A, and got to work. Because if Deborah Carlisle wanted to play dirty, she was about to learn I kept receipts. The paper trail from hell. Most people think HOAs are just about nagging over lawn length and mailbox colors. But after 15 years on the force, I knew better. Power like that, it always leaves a trail. I started digging through public records, property liens, board meeting minutes, even Deborah's own real estate history. At first, it was the usual petty stuff. Fines levied against single moms for excessive holiday decorations, elderly residents harassed over unapproved wheelchair ramps. Then I found the file. Buried in a 2017 zoning dispute was a complaint from a former board member. President Carlisle falsified voting records to push through the pool renovation project. The accusation was quietly dismissed, but the name stuck with me. Richard Valles. A quick search showed Richard still lived in Willow Ridge, in one of the non-HOA homes. Ironically, when I knocked on his door that afternoon, the 70-year-old's face darkened at Deborah's name. That woman's a damn tyrant, he spat. She had me removed from the board after I caught her cooking the books. Richard handed me a yellowed folder. Inside, photocopies of 2 different voter rolls for the same meeting. One showing unanimous approval for a $200,000 pool upgrade. The other with 3 no votes mysteriously missing. Proof she rigged the vote, Richard said. But her brother-in-law is the HOA lawyer. They buried it. The night of the accidental citation. 2 could play the harassment game. That evening, I accidentally left my garage door open. Security cameras conspicuously visible, with a copy of Richard's files on my workbench. Right on schedule, Deborah's shadow passed by at 9:17 p.m. The next morning, another violation notice appeared. Unsecured storage attracting pests, see photo. The attached image showed my garage interior, with the documents clearly visible on the bench. Bingo! Now I had her for trespassing, garage intrusion, retaliation, filing false reports, fraud, those voter records. But the piece de resistance came from an unexpected source. Deborah's own trash. Dumpster diving for justice. Most criminals are stupid. HOA Karens? Next level. At 4 a.m., I watched Deborah's security cam blind spot, a hilarious flaw for someone so obsessed with rules, as she tossed 3 bulging trash bags into the community dumpster. Inside, shredded documents. Too bad for her. She'd used a cheap shredder. 20 painstaking minutes of reassembly later, I held a nearly intact invoice from Premier Landscaping, dated 2 weeks after the pool vote. $45,000 for design consultation. Funny thing, Premier Landscaping didn't exist until the day after the vote. And its registered agent? Deborah's college dropout nephew. The trap springs shut. I could have gone to the cops then. But where's the fun in that? Instead, I invited the entire HOA board to an emergency meeting at my place, framed as a peace offering to Deborah. When they arrived, my TV played the garage trespass footage on loop. You got 10 seconds to explain why you're stealing my documents, I said, tossing the reconstructed invoice on the table. Or I press charges for fraud and forward this to the IRS. The board member's head swiveled to Deborah. Her face went from pink to purple. "This is, you can't." "Oh, but I can." I tapped my badge. Funny thing about falsifying contracts. That's not just an HOA violation. It's wire fraud. Federal prison time. The room erupted. One board member actually screamed, "You told us Premier was vetted." Another demanded an audit. Through the chaos, Deborah locked eyes with me, finally realizing the truth. This wasn't a neighborhood spat. This was a case. And she'd just handed me everything I needed to close it. The twist no one saw coming. Just as the board was turning on Deborah, my phone buzzed. A text from an old colleague at the fraud unit. "Ran your info. Carlisle's nephew's company got payouts from 3 HOAs. Pattern matches a scam in Florida last year." I showed the group. Turns out this isn't her first rodeo. Deborah's knees actually buckled, because here's the kicker. Her nephew had been the mastermind behind the Florida scheme. And now, the paper trail led right back to her. As the board members dialed their lawyers, I leaned in and whispered the words that shattered her. "Should have left the detective alone, Debbie." The moment Deborah's knees hit my hardwood floor, the room erupted into chaos. Board member Gregson, a retired accountant who'd apparently been suspicious for years, immediately grabbed a reconstructed invoice from my table and started cross-referencing dates on his phone. "These payments coincide exactly with our reserve fund audits," he muttered, face turning crimson. Meanwhile, HOA Secretary Linda Rodriguez was already speed-dialing their attorney, her voice shaking as she repeated, "We've been robbed." But Deborah, she wasn't done fighting. The desperate bluff. With a shaking hand, she pointed at me. "This is a setup. He planted those documents." Her voice cracked like cheap plaster. "That landscaping company is completely legi." Actually, interrupted a new voice from the doorway. Every head turned. There stood Richard Valles, the former board member Deborah had ousted, holding a manila envelope thick enough to choke a horse. I brought the originals. The way Deborah's face collapsed would have been hilarious if it wasn't so pathetic. Richard strode in and dumped the contents onto my coffee table. Unshredded copies of the same Premier landscaping invoices, complete with Deborah's personal check signing stamp on the approval forms. "Funny story," Richard said, glaring at Deborah. "When you had me removed from the board, you forgot I still had access to the financial committee Dropbox." The dominoes fall. What happened next was like watching wolves turn on their alpha. The resignation demand. Treasurer Marvin Kwan slammed his fist on the table. "You will submit your resignation by noon tomorrow, Deborah, or we will file a police report." The hidden ledger. Linda discovered a second set of books in the HOA cloud drive, labeled Pool Maintenance, showing $150,000 in contractor fees paid to shell companies over 3 years. The nephew's betrayal. Right on cue, my phone buzzed with a message from my fraud unit contact. Nephew flipped. Says Deborah took 60% of the skim. Text confirm. I projected the messages onto my TV for the room to see. There, in black and white, was Deborah instructing her nephew to make sure the invoices match the reserve report before the audit. The board members' gasps were almost synchronized. Deborah's nuclear option. Just when I thought she'd crumble, Deborah did something astonishing. She laughed. A high, reedy sound that raised the hairs on my neck. "You think this ends with me?" She smoothed her polo shirt with trembling hands. "Every board member here approved those expenditures. All of you signed off on the budgets." Her eyes glittered with malice. "If I go down, so does everyone in this room." A deadly silence fell. Gregson was the first to break it. "Bullshit. You altered the reports after we signed." He turned to me. "Detective will provide full access to all records. This woman has been bleeding this community dry for years." But Deborah wasn't finished. "And what about your little secret, Gregson?" Her smile turned viperous. "The special assessment for the new playground equipment that mysteriously doubled in cost? The one your brother's construction company just happened to win the bid for." The room exploded again. The detective's move. Time to end the circus. I pulled out my cuffs, not because I could arrest her yet, but because the click of steel got everyone's attention. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, locking eyes with Deborah. You're going to repay every cent you stole. You're going to resign today. And you're going to confess in writing that you acted alone. She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. Otherwise, I make one call, and the FBI starts digging into all of Willow Ridge's finances. How many of you, I asked the room, want federal auditors going through your personal bank accounts? The board members practically tripped over themselves agreeing. Even Deborah paled, because we both knew the truth. This wasn't just about HOA funds. The bombshell. I saved the best for last. One more thing. I tapped my laptop, pulling up a property record. This is your nephew's office address in Florida, Debbie. Oddly enough, it's also your vacation condo. I zoomed in on the deed. The one you bought for cash 6 months after the pool renovation. The room went dead silent. Deborah made a sound like a deflating balloon. Because that was textbook money laundering. The walk of shame. 2 hours later, it was over. Deborah signed resignation and restitution agreements under the board attorney's supervision. The nephew agreed to testify against her in exchange for immunity. Every board member submitted to forensic accounting. Gregson's brother did overcharge for that playground equipment by exactly 27%. But the sweetest moment came as Deborah shuffled to her Mercedes, clutching a box of her office belongings. Old Mrs. Petrovsky from across the street, fined relentlessly for her unsightly rose bushes, leaned out her window and yelled what we were all thinking. By Karen. The neighborhood applause was thunderous. The smell of gasoline woke me at 2:17 a.m. I was out of bed before my eyes fully opened, Glock in hand, moving toward the window with muscle memory from a decade on the force. The motion-activated floodlights hadn't triggered yet, but the security panel showed movement near my side gate. Then I saw it. A shadowy figure crouched by my fence, pouring liquid along the wooden slats. Deborah's not smart enough for this, I realized with icy clarity, which means someone else is pulling strings. The fire that backfired. I hit the panic button. Sirens blared. Floodlights turned night into day. The figure spun, not Deborah, but a wiry man in a black hoodie. Our eyes locked to the window for one frozen second before he bolted. He didn't get far. Turns out, when you text your ex-partner, possible arson in progress at my address, before confronting a suspect, cops arrive fast. Officer Diaz had the guy cuffed before he reached the sidewalk. Matches the description of Deborah's nephew. Diaz grunted, yanking down the suspect's hood to reveal the same sallow-faced kid from the fraud investigation. His breath reeked of whiskey and bad decisions. I knelt beside the gas can. Stuck to the bottom was a sticker, Property of Willow Ridge HOA Maintenance Shed 3. The interrogation room revelation. At the precinct, the nephew, Jason Carlisle, folded faster than a cheap lawn chair. She promised me 20 grand. He whined, sweat staining his armpits. Said if your house accidentally burned down, the LLC could buy the lot cheap. Diaz and I exchanged glances. What LLC? What came next was a masterclass in suburban greed. The property play, Deborah had quietly formed Willow Creek Holdings LLC 2 years prior, using her nephew as a straw purchaser. The targeting strategy, non-HOA homes were prioritized because they lacked association sale restrictions. The end game, after acquiring properties distressed, they'd flip them to a developer planning luxury townhomes. But we needed all 6 non-HOA lots to make the deal work. Jason admitted. You were the last holdout. The paper chase. While Jason sat in a holding cell, I got a warrant for Deborah's financials. What we found was staggering. $1.2 million in pending offers from Pinecrest developers. Fake liens placed on elderly neighbors' homes to force sales. Text to Jason. Make the detective's life hell. Insurance won't pay if he abandons a property. But the real smoking gun? A notarized contract showing Deborah stood to make $450,000 as the LLC's consultant, contingent on all 6 lots being acquired within 60 days. The dawn raid. We hit Deborah's mansion at 5:30 a.m. She answered the door in a silk robe, phone in hand, already dialing her lawyer. You'll never prove. Actually, we will. I held up Jason's signed confession. Your nephew rolled over like a show poodle. Also, I nodded to Diaz, who dramatically unfolded the warrant. We've got your burner phone records. That text ordering him to handle the detective problem? Sent from this address at 11:42 p.m. The way her face crumpled was almost poetic. Almost, because as the cuffs clicked shut, Deborah whispered something that changed everything. "You're too late. The other 5 homes already sold to different buyers this morning." The twist no one expected. Back at the station, frantic calls to the county recorder's office revealed the truth. All 5 properties had transferred that day. Not to Willow Creek Holdings, but to shell companies with names like Magnolia Trust and Heritage Acres. Tracing them led to a single entity, Pinecrest Developers. They played Deborah, Diaz realized aloud, used her to strong-arm homeowners, then cut her out last minute. But the final kicker? Pinecrest majority owner was none other than Deborah's estranged husband, currently living in the Caymans. This wasn't just fraud. It was divorce revenge. The neighborhood reckoning. By noon, Willow Ridge was in chaos. SWAT teams hauled filing cabinets from the HOA office. Local news vans camped outside Deborah's mansion. 3 board members resigned after being linked to the scam. But the most surreal moment came when Mrs. Petrovsky, the Rose Bush rebel, marched up to Deborah's lawn and planted a giant yard sale sign in the perfect grass. "Figured you'd need the cash for bail," she told the cameras, sparking a viral meme. The jailhouse visitation log showed a name that made my coffee cup freeze halfway to my lips. Daniel Carlisle. Deborah's supposedly estranged husband. The same man whose Cayman Islands bank accounts had financed the entire property scheme, had flown back to the States the moment his wife got arrested. And now he was sitting across from her in the county lockup's visitation room, having a conversation my police buddies were kind enough to record. The husband's gambit. Daniel's voice crackled to the audio file with crisp, Ivy League precision. You were supposed to scare them into selling Deborah, not commit arson. Deborah's reply was all nasal venom. You set me up. Those shell companies were yours. A pause. Then Daniel dropped the bomb. Pinecrest just sold the assembled parcels to Blackridge Communities for $14 million this morning. Your cut? 0. Unless... The recording picked up the sound of paper sliding across the table. Deborah's sharp inhale. Then, unbelievably, laughter. You're joking. After all this, you want me to... Sign the divorce papers. Daniel finished smoothly. Page 17 waives all claims to the Pinecrest proceeds. Do it and I'll pay your legal fees. The correctional officer's log noted Deborah signed something before storming out. But here's what she didn't know, what nobody knew yet. I owned the 6th property, and Blackridge's CEO was about to make me an offer I couldn't refuse. The billionaire at my door. James Vanderbilt looked absurdly out of place leaning against my mailbox in his $5,000 suit. Detective Harris, he said by way of greeting, eyeing my sweat-stained T-shirt with polite disdain. I'd like to buy your home. I crossed my arms. Not for sale. $800,000. A checkbook appeared in his hand. Cash. No contingencies. That was triple my home's value. I whistled. Must be some mighty important dirt under my lawn. Vanderbilt's smile didn't reach his eyes. Let's just say the county's new light rail extension plans aren't public yet. He tapped his designer's sunglasses against his palm. Your lot's the future station site. Every puzzle piece snapped into place. Deborah and Daniel scam. The Rush property grabs. Even the arson attempt. They'd all been playing checkers while Vanderbilt played chess. The detective's checkmate. I did 3 things that afternoon. Called the DA. Shared the jailhouse recording proving Daniel's involvement. Leaked to the press. A certain investigative reporter got the light rail plans. Made my own deal with the second highest bidder, the City Transit Authority. By sundown, Daniel Carlisle was arrested on conspiracy charges. Deborah got hit with new counts after jail phone calls revealed she knew about the rail plans. Vanderbilt stock plunged 12% on insider trading suspicions. As for me, I sold my house for $1.2 million, with lifetime free transit pass thrown in. The farewell Karen never saw coming. Moving day brought the whole neighborhood out. Mrs. Petrovsky gifted me a rose cutting for your new place. Gregson sheepishly returned the $8,000 his brother had overcharged. Even the mail carrier cheered as the truck pulled away. But the sweetest justice came via certified mail, a notice from the new HOA board. All non-HOA properties are hereby granted permanent exemption status in honor of your service to the community. Attached was a photo of Deborah's former mansion, now sporting city-mandated affordable housing placards in the yard. As my truck turned the corner, the security cam feed on my phone showed a familiar figure lurking near my old porch, Jason Carlisle, staring at the now government-owned property with the look of a man who just realized his inheritance had evaporated.